Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to our lesson summary. This week, we will summarize lesson number 10. Now, one thing is for sure. Once you read these verses that we read this week, your church just comes alive. Why? Just come and join me and you'll find out. Husbands and wives together at the cross. Personally, I would switch the title and call the lesson The Secret of a Happy Marriage. The main memory verse was found in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 to 27. And it said, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with washing of water by the word, and that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having one spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she should be holy and without blemish. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her." Actually, the lesson is divided into two main points: counsels to wives and counsels to husbands. So we're going to deal first with the counsel to Christian wives. And I think that is the main point. This is not a counsel to all the wives, because in today's society, these verses are not welcomed. But because Paul is writing to Christian wives, then these verses actually are very practical for the happiness of my marriage. The verse that is usually read when we talk about advices and counsels to Christian wives is Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22. And this gets all the women talking. And this is what it says: "Wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord." These are hard words for a modern woman. But actually, what God is trying to tell me is that there is power in this verse that will actually add to if I practice, it will add happiness to my marriage. The interesting point of this verse, first, is that Paul is writing to the wives and asking them to submit to their husbands. It's interesting that Paul is not saying, "Husbands, use force to make sure that your wives submit to you." No, it doesn't say that. It says, "Wives, out of your own will, submit yourselves to your husbands as unto the Lord." It also doesn't say, "Church, force the women of the church to submit to their husbands." It doesn't say that. Or it doesn't say, "Government, you have to use the civil power in order to force the women of the countries to submit to their husbands." It doesn't say that. It says, "Wives, out of your own will, submit yourselves to your husbands as unto the Lord." So that's point number one. The wife has to submit because she wants to. What is submission? So we read a couple of verses here that talks about submission. So Philippians 2:4 was telling us, don't look only unto your own things, but give preference to look to the well-being and the things of others. So stop worrying about everything you want, how you want. Try to think about others. We also read Romans 12:10, which gave us the advice to be kind and affectionate one to another, with brotherly love, in honor preferring the other. In other words, Romans is telling me that submission is for me to worry about the well-being of the other. Philippians is telling me, don't just think about your well-being, your preference. Think about the well-being of others. Romans, on the other hand, is telling me, be kind, be considerate, and in honor, give the first place to the other. Mark verses 42 to 45 remind us that submission, if anyone wants to be a leader, he has to be the servant of others. So submission is for me to become a servant, for me to give preference to the well-being of my husband, for me to be kind, forbearing, and honoring him. I know what you're going to say. I understand, because I am a wife and a woman too. But what if he is not kind? But the advice is for me to willingly love my husband, whether he's lovable or not. And that, I personally believe, is the secret to a happy marriage. I'm not saying that if you're in an abusive, physically abusive relationship, stay there. No, you need help. Go get the help you need. The advice does not stop there. So don't worry, wives. So now we go to the Christian husband. Remember, these advices are only for Christian husbands and Christian wives, because we want to do the will of God. We accept the counsel of God as better than anything that I can think. So the husbands were told in Ephesians 5 verses 25, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. What I found interesting is the advices that each one gets, each of the partner. The wife is asked to submit. Could it be that we women have a hard time submitting? Could it be that our problem really is we want to lead out? We want to be number one. We think we know what's best for the family. So then you have two people that are trying to lead, and of course we're gonna butt heads. And the advice to the men is interesting. Husbands, love your wives. Could it be that men have a hard time loving? I don't know. Those are the questions that rose to my mind when I was studying this lesson. The men are asked to love their wives, not because they submit, not because they are lovable, not because they take care of them. God is asking the Christian men to love their wives just as Christ loved the church and died for the church. I don't know about you, but for me, this is the recipe of a happy marriage. Imagine two beings that have come together in holy matrimony. One is willing to submit and serve the husband, while the other one is willing to die for his wife. This is a happy marriage. Then the lesson went on to summarize what marriage was. And we went back to the Genesis story. In Genesis chapter 2, you will notice that Adam is created first. In chapter 2, we find out that God saw that it was not good for men to be alone. So God sees that it's not good for men to be alone. And God says, Adam, I have some work for you to do. And he tells him, I want you to name all the animals I created. And as Adam is naming the animals, Adam discovers something. He discovers that there's a male and a female. Every animal has a companion. And Adam sees the birds are paired. The land animals are paired. The fish are paired. Except him. He realizes that there's no one for him. And so God causes Adam to sleep for a while. And God takes one of the ribs out of Adam and he shapes a beautiful woman. The Bible actually says that God created a helpmeet for Adam. And God brings this helpmeet, this woman, this companion to Adam. And Adam says, whoa, man, this is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. And he calls Eve woman because she was taken from the man. What a beautiful scene. The first marriage ever made. It actually is performed by God. God creates the woman that the man needs, and God brings the woman to the man. And the man is happy with his companion. When was the last time that you look back at how you met your spouse? Remember when you guys were in love? and you were willing to travel long distances to see each other, or spend hours on the phone calling and talking to each other. What the Genesis story reminds us is that once we felt alone and God provided our spouses for our happiness. But as the years go by, we tend to forget that our partners are a gift from God. So Paul is reminding us in lesson number 10, wives, honor your husbands, respect them. Not because they are worthy of respect, not because they are lovable, or because they do everything you want, or they do everything right. No, Paul is reminding us that I have to submit to my husband as unto the Lord. And Paul reminds the husbands, husband, love your wives as Christ was willing to give his life for his church. I don't know about you, but I want to have a happy marriage. And with God's help, I want to put into practice the practical advice that is given in the book of Ephesians. How about you? Why don't we put into practice these wonderful lessons for happy marriages? And let's see what happens. Because God is faithful to fulfill the promise that if we obey Him, the result is happiness. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.